My name is Emily, and I am 28 years old. I live in a small town. I am married to Mark, who is 35 years old. We have 2 children, a son who is 3 years old, and a daughter who is just 6 months old. We moved to this town 2 years ago, and we are settling into our new home. I met Mark 8 years ago when I was 20 and he was 27. We met through some mutual friends at a party, and we hit it off immediately. I remember feeling nervous when I first spoke to him, but he was so easy to talk to. We exchanged phone numbers, and after that, we started chatting all the time. We would talk about everything, our families, our hopes, and dreams for the future. A few weeks later, we went on our first date, and from then on we spent more and more time together. After dating for a while, I knew Mark was the one I wanted to marry. He made me laugh, and I loved spending time with him. I felt comfortable with him in a way I had never felt before. We got married when I was 24, and I felt so happy to start this new chapter of my life with him. Mark told me about his past before we got married. He shared that he had been in a long relationship before me. He was with his ex-girlfriend for 5 years. They had been close, but things didn't work out in the end. Mark said that he had to end the relationship because they wanted different things in life. I also found out that Mark had a first love before his ex-girlfriend. He was very young when he was with her, only 19 years old. He told me that he loved her deeply, but they eventually grew apart when she moved to another city for school. Mark was heartbroken when she left, and he told me he had never fully gotten over her. I could see how much he cared about her, and even though he said he had moved on, I wondered if he still thought about her from time to time. It wasn't long before I started to notice little things that made me feel uncomfortable. Mark would sometimes talk about his first love, especially when we were together with his family. His mother would often mention how much he had loved her, and I began to feel like I was hearing too much about her. I didn't mind hearing about the past every now and then, but it started to feel like I wasn't the most important person in Mark's life. I began to feel like I was just a part of his present, but his past still had a hold on him. One day, we were out with some friends when Mark suddenly became quiet. I looked over and saw him staring at someone from across the room. It was a woman I had never seen before. She was standing with her partner, but Mark seemed so focused on her. He didn't even notice that I was looking at him. I asked him later who she was, and he told me that she was his first love. He said he hadn't seen her in years, but he still cared about her. I could feel a sense of sadness in his voice, and I began to wonder if maybe he still had feelings for her. A few months later, we went on a family trip to the beach. While we were there, Mark received a message on his phone. I saw his face change when he read it, and I couldn't help but feel a bit worried. He tried to hide it from me, but I could tell it was something important. When I asked him about it, he told me it was from an old friend who had reached out to him, and he seemed a little distracted for the rest of the day. At night, when we were alone, I brought up his first love again. I asked him if he ever thought about her, and if she still meant something to him. Mark got upset and said, "I don't know why you keep bringing this up. It's in the past. You're my wife, and I love you." but I wasn't sure if I believed him. His actions sometimes made me feel like he wasn't as committed to me as I had thought. He would bring her up in conversation at random times, and I could tell that he was still emotionally affected by her. As time passed, I started to feel more and more like I wasn't enough for him. I wanted to believe that our relationship was strong, but his constant references to his past made me feel like I was competing with someone I could never meet. I wanted him to focus on our future, but it seemed like he was always looking back. He stopped being as affectionate, and we grew distant. I didn't want to confront him again because I was afraid of what he might say, but I knew I couldn't keep living like this. I wanted to feel like I was truly loved, not like I was second to someone who had been gone for so long. One evening, after a particularly long and quiet day, I decided to talk to Mark one last time. I asked him, "Do you still think about her? Do you want to be with me, or do you wish you were still with her?" Mark looked at me with surprise and said, "Why would you ask me that? I love you, Emily." But I wasn't sure anymore. His words didn't match his actions, and I felt like I was constantly competing with the ghost of someone who had long since moved on. I realized that I couldn't continue in this relationship if I didn't feel like I was truly loved. I needed someone who was present, who was focused on our life together. Not someone who was constantly looking back at the past. It was one of the hardest decisions I had ever made, but I told Mark that I needed space. I told him I couldn't keep living in the shadow of his past. I knew that leaving wasn't going to be easy, especially with our 2 young children. But I couldn't continue to sacrifice my happiness for a relationship where I felt second place. I needed to find a way to be happy again. And I knew I couldn't do that while I was always wondering if I was good enough for him. I needed to move forward, not backward. And I hoped that someday Mark would realize that he needed to do the same. It wasn't easy, and it was painful, but I knew I had made the right choice. I needed to be with someone who loved me fully, someone who would build a future with me without constantly looking over his shoulder at what had been.